Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the siesta session. I can already see a couple of faces that I need to keep awake. All right, my name is Emad Hasan. I use the pronouns he and him. And for those who are just listening, I'm a man wearing a blue jacket and glasses talking about AI. Let's get started. All right, so I am very excited about this topic because I love learning and talking about AI and marketing. But what I love personally even more is performing art. My relationship with performing art started when I was a freshman international student at Penn State, and my roommate, just happenstance, turned out to be the lead character in Gospel at Penn State, and I was like, hey, you gotta be in this play. Pulls me in, I become the lighting guy, and since then I've taken every single theater class I could in school, and as of January of this year, I got to perform stand-up comedy at the Hollywood Improv, which was on my bucket list. So I'm so honored to be here with you for everybody in this industry. Very excited to talk about this topic. All right, let's get started. So this is my picture of how I think, how I feel when I'm learning about AI. Everything is moving so fast. Trying to keep up with it is, everybody was like, all right, I got to give up sooner or later. Just last 2 weeks, here are the pieces of news. Each one of these is worthy of diving deep into on its own. Adobe unveils a video Firefly app which enables you to create videos for marketing. I mean, that itself is really interesting. Meta releases their own AI video model. And then ChatGPT releases something called Canvas, which I think is game-changing, and I'm going to show you guys that in a minute. But this is the pace that we're going at, and every 3 weeks, today, who knows what got launched today? Anybody? Apple Intelligence. So if you have your iPhone 16 Pro, you can download the 18.1 beta, which is Apple Intelligence, which I'm sure will change our workflows in several ways. So what I want to start with is an example. Let's say you're given this task: improve the website copy for Utah Shakespeare Festival's landing page. I'm going to start with this example, which I think will be a little bit overwhelming, but bear with me because we're going to uncover a lot of that throughout the rest of the presentation. We're going to start with what would you do today with ChatGPT, and then we want to look at how you would change your workflow using Canvas. Now, I was thinking in the beginning, as I was preparing for this presentation, I was like, I could do a high-level inspirational conversation, but what I like to do is I like to get my hands dirty and actually do stuff. So I'm going to do a lot of that here, where I'm going to show you, if you were sitting on a computer screen, how would you go about doing that? So let's get started with that. And first example, and again, it might feel overwhelming, but we'll come back to it. All right, so this is the landing page for Utah Shakespeare Festival. If you go to this one landing page, if you're new to the festival, what does this experience feel like? And it's more of a Q&A. It talks a little bit about, it answers a few questions. So what you would normally do is you would print this as a PDF, save it on your hard drive somewhere, and then you'd go to your ChatGPT app, attach it to your, as an attachment, and then you try to write a detailed prompt trying to analyze different aspects of the website. Now, one trick I use that I recommend all of you also try is using dictation. If you have a Mac, it's super easy. If you have an iPhone, it's super easy to dictate. But here I'm asking it to analyze the website, the landing page, try to come up with different feedback on impressions, the visual appeal, the brand, look at how the CTA is structured, if it's compelling or not, and add as much detail as I possibly can. There's a trick I'm going to share with you guys a little bit later. You might say, hey, like this seems like extremely long, but why are you using all these different aspects? And I'll share a little bit of that reasoning later. But you want to give as much detail here as possible. So let's see what it comes up with if I give it this detailed prompt on give me a full review of this landing page. Now, one other thing you can do is you can also give it the actual link, because it also has browsing capabilities. So let's see if I can go back to the landing page, copy paste the link, and paste that here, and hit go. Now, I assume most of you have tested some version of this out. Now you can see it's coming up with recommendations on visual branding, messaging, call to action recommendation. If you scroll all the way down to recommendations, you can see very specific recommendations it's giving you. Now, as marketers, I expect all of you have some version of this that you have tried. You can do this. But now I give it a very special command called start a blank canvas. Now, what that did is opened up a side window, and I think this is game-changing. Now I'm copying the whole copy here from the landing page. I can go back to my canvas, paste it here, and use it as an interactive document, and it's actually a markdown document, so you can add headings and formatting. And you can you can start to ask questions about very specific things within the document. And you can say, hey, go through this document and start commenting not only on the generic document, but on very specific points where you think you would want to give me a recommendation. So the prompt I'm giving it now is, this canvas has the copy with the Q&A. Can you please go through and comment and give me suggestions on each different section? And now what it's doing is going through and reading each different section, and it's going to be building comments for each one of them. And if I click on any of these comments, I can see what exact suggestion it has for me for any one section. Right, so I'll give an example. So here, like, consider doing X, Y, Z. Here's another comment. And not just that, I can go and edit this document live. So, and this just came out 2 weeks ago, right? So the reason I'm showing you this is this stuff, after I looked at this, I'm never using Microsoft Word again. Before I jump into any kind of editing or reviewing, I go here, mess around with it, ask it for recommendations, go through a few times, and then get to a point where I'm ready to share. So now I know this was an overwhelming example, but I'll come back to this. I think the point here was that there are tools coming up at speed that are very helpful, especially for us as marketers, that we should start adopting as soon as possible. All right, so how do we think about this in our world? I want you to think about what AI lets you do today. So if you think about large language models, it's very hard to see. There are so many different things going on and so many different things getting released all the time. I like to put them in quantifiable buckets of exactly what's happening. So there are 5 things it does, and I will walk through some examples. Number 1, it can generate text, images, voice, and video, and it can also analyze it iteratively. So we looked at one example of that, and I'll give you some pointers about that. It can translate from any language and tone to another language, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. It can structured, unstructured data, which all of us have to deal with very messy data most of the time, and that's one thing we'll figure out how to do together. Personalized responses and optimized responses, and it can do thinking. Now, today, it's not as good at thinking as it will be eventually, but there are still some really good examples that I think are really surprising when I look at it, and we'll look at some of these together. All right, so let's get into the first one. Before we get into this first one, I do want to talk about an interesting topic that I observe, which is we have camps of marketers. We have marketers who have decided they're going to adopt AI fully and they're going to dive deep into it. There are others who are skeptical, and then there are others who have decided not to use it at all. And if I put myself in the shoes of our stakeholders, our customers, one of the things I'm realizing is that if I'm a customer, if I get a marketer who has the skill sets of AI versus one that doesn't, I would probably always pick the one that does have it. So that's been my mindset, that, hey, I want to stay ahead of it because I know that this is a disruptive technology. And even if I know that this is going to change the world, instead of being scared of it, let's adopt it, but do it safely. So at the end of today's conversation, I want to spend a significant amount of time on also talking about safety of AI and what are some simple rules that we could keep in mind that would allow us to use this technology safely. All right, let's ask a question. What's the minimum number of words you need to write a successful ChatGPT prompt? So raise your hand if you think the minimum number of words for a successful ChatGPT prompt is at least 10. Should be a lot of hands, right? Okay, keep your hand up if you think it's at least 50 words. 100, 200, 300, 400. Okay, that's about the right answer, 400 words for a per ChatGPT prompt. It seems ridiculous, right? Like, that's a lot of words to get. And this has been my experience. I've chatted with a lot of people who feel they use ChatGPT and feel underwhelmed. And this is one of the reasons. If you give it a very generic prompt, you're going to get a very generic answer. But I want to give you some tools to think about these 400 words. How do you get to those? So I think it's a very difficult thing to give a human a blank slate problem because, sometimes you'll be in the context where you can give it a lot of context and other times not. So I recommend breaking up your prompt into 6 different steps. So number 1, clearly define and specify the role you want ChatGPT to assume. The reason for that is because it has a large corpus of data it's looking at. And what you want to do is point it in one corner of the universe, of its own universe, where it knows to go and look for that knowledge. So for example, you could give it a role such as a teacher, historian, marketer, copywriter, right? So pick a role that you want to, and you could be very specific of what type of a copywriter. Set the scene, that's number 2. Give it some context or background. Hey, I'm working with a stakeholder who is working on a website, or like give it some more description of what's going on. State the objective. What are you trying to achieve? Be very clear about that. Hey, we're looking to review the copy for our website, or we're trying to come up with a creative for a marketing campaign. And then you include the specific instruction. Your goal is to create a copy for this upcoming event and give it some detailed instructions. Now, number 5 is the most important part. And if you ever look up any news about this or go into any technical detail, they call it one-shot examples, multi-shot examples. The more examples you give ChatGPT of what you want the output to look like or what you've seen in the past, it will do a better job. I'll give you one example. Most of the times, if somebody gives me something that comes out of ChatGPT, I look at them like it's very clearly written by ChatGPT. The way you change that is in your examples, or even in the custom instructions part, you want to give it some examples of previous emails, essays, or blog posts that you've written, and ask ChatGPT to follow the exact specific style that you've used in the past. And that will make it a lot more personalized, and it will not look like the generic email you get or generic output that you normally get. Lastly, give it some additional context. And the additional context could be the format you want the output to come out in. Do you want bulleted format? Do you want a narrative format? I often give it some additional context saying, hey, before you come up with the output, please ask me like 5 to 6 clarifying questions that would improve your answer. So that way it actually tries to learn more about my question, maybe even thinks about asking the right question. So I want to give you guys this framework that gets you to those 400 words actually fairly easily. Like if you start to fill out these things, you'll get to the 400 words fairly fast. Now let's look at a quick example of what this might look like. So you are a social media expert with extensive experience in managing cultural and artistic institutional accounts. A prestigious symphony orchestra wants to increase their online presence engagement on Instagram and TikTok, appealing to younger, more diverse audience. So those are your role and scene, setting the objective, create a comprehensive social media plan and strategy for the next 3 months aimed at increasing visibility, engagement, ticket sales, and upcoming performances. For the upcoming performance. Then you give it the instruction, which is include content ideas, posting schedule, engagement tactics, methods to measure in success, give it an example, and then give it some context, and there you go. That's a well-constructed prompt for you. We're not going to run this, but hopefully this gives you some idea of how to structure. All right, now comes the fun part, translation from any language to another language, right? Now, let me ask you this. If I was to give you this task, build and publish to the web a simple Pictionary game app in less than 5 minutes. Just publish it completely where your kids can go play this game. I want to see if anybody here thinks they can do this quickly. All right, let's see if you can do it in 5 minutes. I guarantee you after this, you all can do it in 5 minutes. All right, so there's a tool out there called Claude AI, very similar to ChatGPT, but it has this concept of creating artifacts and publishing them to the web. So here, you can come in and give it a detailed prompt. So now I'm going to give it not 400, but almost like 600 word prompt, where I will tell it, you're tasked with creating a web-based Pictionary game using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The game should have 3 difficulty levels, easy, medium, and hard. It should include a bank of a couple of thousand words with clear distinction between difficulty of the words for each category. Approximately 1,000 words should be included in each difficulty level, and words should be distinct across each level. The game must also include timer option for 1, 2, or 3 minutes. A scoring system will add points for correct guesses and subtract a point for skips. Sound effects may be added. The interface should be modern and visually appealing. With blue-red color scheme. The buttons should be curved in pill shape, featuring hover effects. The game should flow with will begin with the player selecting the difficulty level, followed by the time limit. Once the game starts, the first word will appear, timer will begin, and then give it some URL placeholder for sound files so that it's easy to find those and see where we get to. So now this is a pretty long prompt, right? Like I've just shared with you guys. Now, it may or may not come up with the right answer or right artifact in the first shot, but let's see how it does. And still writing it. So again, right, I do this all the time is I will actually write down some version of the prompt, but then I'll dictate it to the computer, and often it gets some parts of it wrong, but it usually will figure out like where it got things right or where it got things wrong. But I'm realizing my 5-minute counter is going, so let's see if I make the 5 minutes. All right, here we go. So very shortly, you'll see that it starts to create some of the code. Now, this is all HTML and CSS code. No need to understand what it's doing. What you need to understand is what you asked and how well it followed that task. And you need to have a way to see what it looks like. So there you go. You saw the little glimpse of the app, and then it's coming up with the JavaScript that comes along with it, which I don't like because I'm like, hey, I want this all in one file. I don't want to have 2 different files because then I might have to deploy it separately. So maybe that will be my next prompt, to ask it to put it all together. And the other thing I noticed as it was going through is it didn't put together a good word bank together. So now I'm giving it a prompt. Hey, no, let's come up with a single file and also the data bank, or the detailed word bank within that file. And let's see if it can update the whole thing very quickly. So that's the other part, right? So just because you didn't get it right on the first prompt, no big deal. You can iterate over this as well. So let's see what it does. And more importantly, does it work? You guys are like, hey, you recorded this before, so it absolutely works. Or you can see the word bank, right? So these words, it's putting in different categories, easy, medium, and hard. And the hard ones look super hard. Like, who would do that in Pictionary? Like, try coming up with that word. All right, there you go. So let's see if it actually works. You can pick the difficulty level, pick the timer. There you go. If you press correct, then the timer is going. If you press correct, then it adds the score. If you skip, then it subtracts the score. So it looks like it's working, right? Now, this is cool. Looks like a good prototype, but I want to publish it to the web so I could, share it with my kids. So you click publish and copy link. There you go. I can go to this link in a new window. And voila, there's my Pictionary app, right? Now, all of you can do this. I didn't have to write a single line of code. I just had to like have my concept, speak it out in a lot of detail. And to be honest, when I first did this, it was not as much detail. I had to iterate with it a couple of times. For shits and giggles, I put it in tinyurl, and you can, if you go to tinyurl.com/Pictionary-NYC, you can actually get to this app. All right. The other thing is multimodal. Now, how many of you have played around with ChatGPT where you give it an image? Anybody? All right. I'm glad some of you have done this. I did this the first time where, so single modal AI models, you give it the same data type, you give it text, on the other side comes out text. That's what a single modal AI model is. But multimodal is you could give it text, image, combination of text, image, and voice, and it can then convert it into text, image, or voice. So inputs can be any of these formats, and outputs can be any of these formats. So here's an example I remember. I gave a talk a few months ago in Miami. I was in my hotel room. I took a picture from my hotel and gave this to ChatGPT and said, hey, looking at the landmarks, where do you think this photo was taken? And I was blown away. So if you look at the response from ChatGPT, it like tells me where it might be. It looks like it's Florida, then identifies the bridge as MacArthur Causeway, which is exactly where I was. And it blew my mind. I was like, wow, this thing can truly like see it. And I wouldn't have known where I am if you asked me. So it's like, I'm somewhere in Miami, but this knows it better. All right, let's do another exercise. I have two videos here. Which one do you think is AI generated is a prompt or question? All right, let me play this one.
In a sales world hungry for proof, we've hit a snag. You know it, I know it. We're all clamoring for those case studies and sales stories that seal the deal. Did you know 92%?
Okay, how many of you think that's AI generated? Okay, good, majority. All right.
En un mundo de ventas ávido de pruebas, nos hemos topado con un problema. Tú lo sabes, yo lo sé.
All right. So, yeah, for those of you who didn't get it, both of them are AI generated. I gave it, so if you guys have not used this tool, HeyGen is like the gimmicky tool that does this, where you give it a 15-minute video of yourself, and then you can give it any script you want, and it will create a video for you. And it's only getting better. Like, you could see like my lips aren't kind of quite right on that first one, but it's definitely getting better very, very fast. So this idea of translation between any language and tone, I think as marketers, I'm like, wow, this is game-changing, right? Like, I remember I used to work at Facebook, and one of the biggest teams we used to have was translation and internationalization, where we'd have to localize every single piece of creative we created into like 115 different languages. And I think that's going to be almost trivial at this point. All right, so I showed you guys the Pictionary example, which is great, but that's not marketing related. Let's turn that into an example where we have to deal with. All of it, I assume most of you have to deal with some sort of missing or messy data all the time, dealing with it in Excel, formulas, files getting lost. That job just got a lot easier, right? So let's do an example. Let's say I gave you this task. For our direct mail campaign, let's clean up the list of physical addresses for our loyal customers. So here's the task. Look at this Excel file. It has this address line for different businesses, and you can see that they have different parts of it. You have address line number 1, then you have like a suite number or apartment number, then you have the city name, and then you have the state and zip code. The very common task, we have to figure out how to separate these out in a useful way. And most of the times we're mucking around with formulas on Excel to figure out how to separate this stuff out. Now, one thing you could do is you could literally just give it to ChatGPT and say, hey, separate these out. Probably could do a good job. But I want to use the same example as the Pictionary example. Let's create an app that could do this for all of our teams all the time. So in this case, I'm going to create an app. I'm not going to dictate the whole prompt. But at the end, if you read this prompt, all it's saying is, hey, you create an HTML JavaScript app where you're going to start to break apart the address lines, looking at first the commas and spaces, then you're gonna look for a suite number, you're gonna look for a city name, and it's gonna start to parse that out. Now, again, right, like this probably doesn't get it right on the first try, but I think once we have this, it could be really powerful. So let's take a look at what it actually creates. So here's that address processor. Let's take this bunch of like sample addresses here and see what it does. So let's paste it here, process. And you can see that it didn't quite get it right. You can see address line number 2, it's all NAs, and you can see suite number is not populated. So what I didn't do is I didn't try to debug this problem. I just said, I'm looking at the data and it doesn't look correct. Can you check your work and retry? See what happens. I'm the slowest thing in this whole process, right? Me typing, it's like everything else happens pretty fast. And I'm sure this is going to get way faster over the next several years. Like it's already pretty fast, but. So now you can see that it's starting to like do a better job at the address line 2, but city name is still not correct, right? So I can say, all right, looks a little bit better, but city name is not great, so I can do that. So finally, you'll see me writing perfect, and then I realize, oh, it still has some corrections to do. That I then changed my opinion, and so line 2 looks good. But let's change the city names. Now, Claude is free right now. I think they don't really charge money for this artifact thing. There is a paid version of it, but I highly recommend messing around with this because it gives you all these like really nifty tools you could build that are easy. Another example was that I didn't include here is A/B testing. How often do we get asked, hey, you guys ran an experiment. Was it a significant, were the results of the A/B test significant or not? ChatGPT can do that for you, but not only that, you can build a tool that can easily do this for everybody in the company. So let's see what the results look like for this one. All right, so now let me paste this, and now you can see it improved it. So here's an example, and you can hit that publish button again and deploy this app very quickly, right? So. And this took me maybe like a couple of hours to really go through and just go back and forth and get this right. And then I was able to actually share this with a client team that they use this address cleaning for their direct mail campaign all the time. And it's actually a practically useful application. All right, let's move on to the next topic, personalizing responses. So how many of you here have heard of clay.com? Anybody? Okay, I'm about to change your world. Okay, so clay.com is the data enrichment tool, and it is a no-code tool. So you don't need to know any coding. And what it has this ability to do, it has all these features of connecting to Apollo or connecting to other data sources to append and enrich data. But I think the most interesting feature it has is this ability to scrape a website, scrape a LinkedIn, scrape a Facebook page, and then have ChatGPT apply the logic to that scraped page. So, for example, and I'm not going to go through the full video example here, but here's an example of a bunch of like medical spas that I needed to figure out how many locations do these medical spas have, what are their addresses. So all I give it is the URL of the medical spa, have clay.com scrape the website, and then I have an industry. Actually, here I'm looking at what exact industry does this belong in, and I give it a prompt saying, "Hey, look at the copy that you scraped from the website, and give me the exact industry out of these like list of industries that it might be," and it does that job. And this was like a really manual task for account executives or salespeople that they had to do manually before, and it's completely changed now, and this is being done completely autonomously. So anything that requires any kind of research or like in-depth a classification of a certain data set, I highly recommend playing around with this tool. And once you do, like, there's no reason you couldn't like build a version of it that is more customized and maybe cheaper. But this is a really great tool to get some inspiration on like all the different things you might be able to do with data enrichment and doing some research. All right. Lastly, the thinking part. This is also something that amazes me, and we're going to do two examples here. One is going to be a generic one, and then I want to bring it to a marketing example. So let's start with this question. How many letters are in your next response? This is, if I gave ChatGPT this question, the amount of thinking it would have to do is actually a few steps, right? So you have to think about an answer and then count the number of letters, right? If I asked you guys, hey, how many letters are in your next response, how would you decide to answer that question? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody want to attempt answering this question? Go ahead.
4.
Good. Exactly. That's the right answer. So let's see what ChatGPT does. So I gave it this answer, and you give it this prompt, and you can see a series of thought process that it went through, and it actually lists out how it thought through all that, and it came up with a full sentence that said there are 29 letters in this response, right? And then I asked it for another example, and it can come up with a different answer, right? So this is pretty amazing, I think, the fact that it can like methodically think through different steps and come up with a detailed answer, almost like a research analyst, which is pretty interesting. So let's take a look at a real-world example. So here, develop an innovative data-driven marketing strategy for an art marketing company aiming to promote a global virtual art fair featuring emerging digital artists, and a bunch of other stuff I included in here to give it some more depth. Let's see what it does. And again, what I want to highlight here is like the kinds of things it thinks about before it answers a question is pretty impressive. You can look at, it's creating a strategy, then it's looking at different audience segments, how it would impact those, thinking about the AI potential, what would it maximize engagement. So it's starting to give it a lot more thought process than you would think on surface. It's not just spitting out the next word. And I think that part makes it pretty incredible, and I suspect this is only going to get better over time. And it comes up with a full detailed analysis. So I think this stuff is, in my mind, kind of mind-blowing on where this is headed. All right, I did say I started, actually spent a lot of time early days of my last company, which was a machine learning company, thinking about safety of AI. And there's like 6 different rules we came up with at our company that made sure that we were not going to use AI in a way that would harm society in any way. I'm going to share 3 primary ones that I think are important. And the reason I think it's important is I unfortunately think our government that should be at the forefront of making sure our AI is safe is not really stepping up to the plate. So at least we, as in our practice, should make sure that we're taking the measures on our behalf where we can. So let's start with some of the rules. Oh, before that, I did want to share. This is what our fear was of what AI is going to bring. But the reality of AI safety issues we run into are these, right? So where Google is messing up the race of the people for the images it's generating, or deep fakes of Taylor Swift, or lawyers using ChatGPT and getting tripped up. Like, these are real problems that are happening today. Like the Terminator stuff that a lot of people are talking about, yes, maybe that might be true, but like today we're dealing with this stuff. And this is all easy stuff. We shouldn't be tripping up on a lot of this stuff. So what are the rules, right? So number 1 is data privacy, right? So the fact that we have probably a lot of customer data that we are sitting on, we need to make sure that we have policies as well as tooling in place to protect any kind of private data that should not go into any kind of model training. So making sure that that setup exists, GDPR compliance exists, to make, and that part is secure. And I think that this is very doable. The part that gets tricky for us marketers is the second one. transparency and accountability. So if you're going to use ChatGPT to create that video, for example, the 2 videos that I created where I was describing some product, it's very clear that, maybe it's clear today that those are generated with AI, but tomorrow it might not be. And in that case, I think it behooves me to make sure that I'm always labeling that content as AI generated. I think that's going to be a big thing. Like, you should not ever be able to deceive a customer that something that is AI generated is pretending to be a human. Secondly, and this goes for both like AI generated and then like AI appended, if there's some version of it that we need to think about. And then lastly, data lineage. We don't think about this a lot today, but like if you are going to use any kind of ChatGPT-based responses, the problem with a lot of these large language models is they hallucinate. They will come up with random references that look very real, but they're not necessarily real. So making sure that you know where the data is coming from, check all the references. So these are kind of the 3 simple ones. There's a few more that we can go deeper into at some point, but like these are the primary ones I think about to just get started. All right. Staying up to speed. I think this is another important aspect. Like, there's a lot going on, and like, how do you stay up to speed? I mean, for one, you have to be curious, but I also want to share some actual resources, right? So one, I think trying to use ChatGPT, Claude, or pick your favorite tool and use it to some extent daily. Like Bard, ChatGPT, Claude are all free. Some version of it is freely available. I also highly recommend reading the book The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman, who's the CEO, co-founder of DeepMind. This book is really well written, both from an opportunity perspective and also the dangers we may face if we don't adopt this technology responsibly. Another piece of homework I recommend is your default homepage on your browser. I've, for now, like at least a year, set it to perplexity.ai, and it has changed how I get information, and it's made my life really, really easy. It's the first place I go search for, unless I'm actually looking for like a bunch of resources where a Google search might be a better better path to go. And then setting up your custom instructions on ChatGPT. ChatGPT has a way for you to tell it what your writing style is, what type of preference you have in terms of the outputs it's giving you to make it actually more useful. And then there's a bunch of newsletters I'm signed up for, but I recommend this one. Rundown AI has now become one that is easily readable. It's free. You can sign up for it today, and they'll send you an email a day, at least during the weekdays, and give you some of the most recent highlights of what's happening. And then multimodality is starting to take off. The one I really like is Google's Notebook LM for creating podcasts. I'd recommend checking that out as what's happening right now. All right, I think that's all I got for you. Happy to answer some questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Helmers. I'm a consultant at CI. I am a white woman wearing a white top, a brown blazer, and orange polka dot pants. So a lot of good questions from this session. This is a good one. How do you feel comfortable using generative AI in the arts and culture sector when generative AI writing an art comes directly from artists, in many cases without credit or compensation?
Yeah, I think this is an issue of our times. This is 100% going to be, I think 5 years from now, we are going to have some sort of creator compensation model. Otherwise, this cannot go on. Now, the big battle that's going on is, will we have one model to rule them all, or will each artist get like a mini version of their AI where they get to like get royalties out of that? So I think this story is not written yet, and I think that there's a lot of really interesting debate and business models that are going to evolve. Now, as marketers, should we not adopt or stay at the forefront of the technology? Like, my recommendation is to like at least be in the know and use it responsibly. And start there,
Yeah. This question is from Kaylee. How do we future-proof our intellectual property so that our ideas aren't technically in the public domain or worse, belonging to a tech company? Or is that even possible?
Totally. I think it's a really valid question. And so if you look at some of the paid versions of these apps, if you use the free one, you're literally giving away your IP. If you use some of the paid versions, and especially the corporate paid versions, there are agreements in there that protect your IP. But even then, right, like being very thoughtful on like which tools you're using and what IP is being fed into those is absolutely important. And I've always, and I probably shouldn't, but I pay for both Claude and ChatGPT's like professional licenses just because I don't want anything that I'm creating to be used for model building. And I also have to go and opt out of like them using that data for any kind of model building. Now, even then, like having said all of that, you're still sending your data over the wire. So if you're even more paranoid, then you might want to have some sort of an AI model that's in-house that either on cloud or on premise is completely owned by your company.
Yeah, so there was some context around that question. The example given was, say that website or that game that you were using as an example started to take off and make a lot of money. Using a paid model like what you've just said would protect you in those instances.
Ideally, like now that particular one, I don't even know like how it would make money, but if it did, yeah, for sure.
This is a question from Alex. Obviously, there are new tools coming out every day. Is there anything that you immediately look for in a new AI tool to quickly assess whether it's going to be worth investing your time and energy in?
It's a good question. I think this one is very relevant to the job that you do, right? So I mentioned the clay.com. I spend a lot of my time dealing with data and marketing automation data, and for me, something like that is very, very relevant. Whereas if you're a creative and your job, you're in the world of like creative, then mid-journey type updates, like I didn't even talk about mid-journey, but like I think tools that are related to creative are very different. So I think it depends on the job. Having said that, that rundown AI newsletter that I shared is a really good place where they'll share a lot of the very relevant stuff that's coming out all the time.
Great. Another question, there are lots of them for this session. I imagine there is a lot of overlap between the brands and missions of the organizations attending today. What's to stop AI from suggesting the same strategies and recommendations to all users with similar queries?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my point of like, if you don't take AI to the corner of the universe that you want it to go, it's going to give you such a generic answer that you're going to not want to use this tool ever again. Because the way it works is it's predicting the next best, at the core of it, it's predicting the next best word, and that the distribution of that next best word is just an average. So if you don't tell it to go to one corner where it's really specifically answering your question, the answer is always going to look very generic. So that how you build that prompt is really, really important. So my suggestion is start with that and see if that changes the output.
Sure. A question from Tim. Do you think AI prompt writer and similar skills will be a mandatory qualification for members of editorial and marketing departments in the future?
It reminds me a lot of when Google came around. So if you can use Google search in a much smarter way, so for example, you can use like the site.colon or file type or file name, you knew how to use that a little bit better than the average person, then you could actually do really well at your job. And I don't think this is that different. Like if you are a better prompt writer than somebody else, then you have a better chance at creating higher quality or higher efficiency output. And I think it's going to go a similar way.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of the problem of poisoning the well as a greater supply of AI-generated content makes its way into the public realm and is adopted by future LLMs?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. So I spent some time with a CEO of a company that is selling AI-generated art. And what's interesting is that they certainly have a business, but the quality of that art and the price point of that art is so different than what an artist would create that I don't know. And to be honest, the answer is I don't know, but I'm really trying to figure out like where that's going to go. But today, like most of the art that's getting created by any of these AIs, at least the value of it is very low. Does it dilute the whole ecosystem? I don't know, and I think it's very possible. Yeah, I mean, think about like all the podcasts like that are going to exist, all the blog posts. It's already happening.
Yeah.
So that's a fair concern, I think.
I had one of my own questions after watching your presentation and seeing that translated video.
Yeah.
What do you think is the quality and the accuracy of those translated videos, and how can a company be sure that what they're providing as a translation is correct?
It's a good question. So this I have a really good answer for, right? So when I worked at Facebook, we had an army of like 2,000 people doing both the translation and then verification of localization. Now we just need the verification people, right? So it just changes the efficiency at which you still need somebody to verify, right? And then give it feedback to correct it. But I think the efficiency of that is going to go up by quite a bit, you know?
Can you tell when and or how your organization or content has appeared in an AI response? And is there a way to influence what models know or say about your organization?
Yeah, really good question. So Catherine, who's in the audience somewhere, she's working with a company called Polygraph, which detects AI content. And I think this cat and mouse game of like AI generation, undetectable AI generation and detecting it is going to go on for a long time. And not only that, I think there's going to be another aspect of it, which is the security and cybersecurity side of it. I think that's going to probably become a really big issue over time, where we're going to have to like figure out ways to detect. And there's already some technology that exists here, but I think this is going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with. And I must say, I'm no expert in depth, and like I don't know a lot of these answers, so I'm just sharing my experiences of where I see things.
Yeah. Another question, do you think companies should have a standardized policy on AI use, especially when it comes with some ethical concerns in the arts? Or do you think that could limit innovation?
No, absolutely. I think that being passive about it is not going to work, right? You have to have an active policy, and even if the policy is, hey, we don't want everybody to use it, like at least give it some thought and know where and when to use it, or not to use it, right? I think being thoughtful and strategic about it is going to be extremely important. I spend a lot of time with board members and CEOs of organizations who are now trying to think about, and they're putting pressure on their CEOs to figure out, hey, what is your AI strategy? And I think this is going to be a thing, and especially for this audience, I think this is going to be a very important, like, where do you stand? How does it align with your values? It's going to be a big conversation for sure.
You've said a little bit about the benefits of some of the paid AI models. Do you think that organizations need to have a paid version for it to make a significant impact on workflow?
I think from a security point of view, it makes sense to have paid. I think the cost of that is going to go down over time. It's going to continue to go down over time as we have bigger and cheaper models. But yeah, I think that's for sure going to be in.
All right. Let's give Emad another round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.